there's a developmental delay in effect in our emotional development because of the trauma, because we were not free to melt down or get some help when we needed it, to like, how do I deal with how I'm feeling right now? And this actually like changes how your nervous system develops. Finding that out was like such a relief. It's like, okay, I'm not a bad person. I'm not crazy. I have normal trauma symptoms because of some very abnormal, weird stuff that happened when I was a kid.
Youest You community, I am so excited about this conversation, and we get to hang today with Anna Runkle, who is the founder of Anything Crappy Childhood Fairy. If you've heard about it, I bet you have. She's also the author of Re-Regulated. So we're going to go deep into how to re-regulate your nervous system and I'm going to let Anna share her background, but this is going to be such an important episode, especially if you've had any kind of childhood trauma with a lowercase t or uppercase t, PTSD, anything where you can tell that there's still trauma there, and so much more. Anna, I'm so happy to have you here. I've loved your work, and I was so excited at the opportunity to have this conversation. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here too.
So let's get started. I think for those who don't know you or don't know your story, it's always helpful to get a little background in perhaps your childhood. I'm assuming you didn't have like the fairy tale childhood, or something must have gone on that made you feel like you wanted to really teach and talk about, how to overcome the trauma from our childhood. Can you share a little bit about your experience growing up, your childhood, and how did you get into this work?
Well, I grew up in a commune. And yeah, I grew up in Berkeley, California. And my mom, when my parents got divorced when I was 7, she turned the house into a commune. But it wasn't like a philosophical peace love commune. It was very focused on drugs and alcohol. And so my siblings and I grew up with the presence of a lot of people really loaded, stumbling around, getting really unsafe, sound of broken glass. A lot of the stuff that ends up following all of that: poverty, abuse, neglect. We were hungry sometimes. There were definitely some plus sides of, having these intellectuals coming and going from the house. But as I was growing up, the signs of trauma started to show up. And when I was a kid, that just wasn't a thing. I'd go to the doctor when I had a fever and a serious infection raging for 2 weeks when I was a kid. And the doctor wouldn't question that and be like, what's going on? Why didn't you bring her in sooner? She's totally dehydrated. Or we were very, very unsupervised. And so sometimes the neighbor parents would help us out. So that's kind of how I grew up. And as I got older, most of my family ended up dying from drugs and alcohol. For whatever reason, I didn't get that gene. And I gave it, I could have easily gone down that route. I certainly gave it the opportunity, but it never caught with me. The way that I manifested my trauma was in really difficult relationships, over functioning, started with taking care of younger siblings, and then as a young adult, trying to achieve, feel good enough. And so that was how it was building up. And by the time I was 30, I was starting to break down, and I didn't know why. And it was very hard to find anybody who could help me.
So, wow, gosh, even just the growing up in a commune and being surrounded by drugs and alcohol, obviously not even close to an ideal situation for a child, and then your siblings, and just seeing that. I mean, what I'm hearing is no real parenting at all. So when you got to 30, what were you noticing with breaking down mentally, emotionally, physically? Share more about that, and then how you started to find solace and relief and healing.
Well, I hit what I call a trauma storm, and that's when a whole bunch of bad things happen at once. Just life goes that way sometimes. So all in a very short period of time, I got my heart broken by somebody who meant the world to me, ended things for good. I got attacked on the street. I was beaten unconscious randomly, and they broke my jaw and my teeth. So I had a head injury from that. And about a week after that, I saw my mother for the last time. She was dying of cancer. So all of that was a lot to go through all at once, and especially the attack. Now, I'd gone to the doctor and said, something's not right. I can't read. I can't focus. I can't remember who I'm talking to on the phone. I'm crying all the time. I'm panicked. And they'd go, well, were you raped? And I was like, no, I was attacked. And they said, well, we took a CAT scan. It looks fine. Why don't you take some Xanax? Which I tried and very quickly realized that was going to make things worse for me. And then the other idea, and this is like what you're supposed to do when you're having a hard time, is go to a therapist. So I already had a therapist once a week. I started going 3 times a week, and she would say, let's talk again about what happened. Under the idea that, we used to have that if we just talked about it enough, somehow we'd have relief. But what was happening to me is the opposite. The more I talked about it, the further down the spiral I went. And I was really ashamed that I wasn't benefiting from this therapy. She was a good therapist. She was well known. And it was free. In my state, California, when you're a victim of a crime, you get free therapy for a while. And, but I would sit out in my car just like trembling. I couldn't even drive home. I was so just, broken by having to talk about things. Well, nobody knew then, but I had PTSD from getting assaulted, and I had underlying complex PTSD, which is the kind that comes from chronic, ongoing, intense stress, usually during childhood, not always. But in my case, yes, I had been successfully compartmentalizing that, which can be a very good thing. We have to, so healthy compartmentalization is a good thing. But sometimes an adult trauma comes along and it just knocks the genie out of the bag and you can't put it back. And I couldn't function. And people were treating me like I was crazy. But of course, my symptoms are really normal for complex PTSD.
And I'm assuming this was also at a time, I know things have changed so much where it wasn't understood. Did you find, that was there an understanding around PTSD? The talk therapy, it sounds like it just brought up more stress and reactivated your nervous system is what I'm hearing.
I know that now. I didn't know what it was. I really had a lot of shame and kind of, attacked myself and just thought I should do better. What's wrong with me? Everybody says it's so great to go see a therapist. I should feel better. I should be getting somewhere. But I was getting nowhere.
Yeah.
It was going nowhere. But what was interesting is, I had been going for years, and we would talk about my mom so much. My mom was always like a campfire in the living room. Everybody was fascinated with her. She was beautiful and accomplished and completely loaded on alcohol, heroin, drugs all the time. And so that would always just sort of, I don't know, just suck the energy out of the room. And what I have since learned, and that's a lot what my program would end up being about, is, yes, that happened. But all of my healing happens in me in present time. There's nothing I can do about the past or other people. Well, what happened to save my life is an acquaintance of mine. I happened to confide in her one night. I said, I think I cannot keep living anymore, and I've made a decision. And she was this young woman I barely knew, but she was all tattooed, and she swore all the time. She was sober in AA, and it was all she ever talked about. And she said, well, you want to come in? I'd given her a ride. She said, you want to come in? I have this thing you might want to try. It really helped me when I was feeling that way. And so I went in, and that night becomes the night of everything before and everything after. That just changed everything. And she basically showed me something that she had learned from an AA guy who is still in my life. He's a friend as well now. He was just somebody who was doing a way of working the steps every day, the 12 steps. And not everybody does that. People do it a lot of different ways. And lately we've been talking, we're like, the people who have to do it every day, maybe there's a lot of trauma there. And maybe there's a lot of dysregulation. And after 30 years of using this technique she showed me to get my fearful, resentful thoughts on paper, ask God to remove them. And then she suggested I go learn meditation. And I went and learned transcendental meditation, which ended up being very helpful and compatible. And she said, go do that twice a day. Call me periodically and read what you wrote. And I would do that. And within 2 weeks, the depression that I had been in, we had been just like going down, 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 just like poof. I had a radical spiritual experience of just knowing I belong here. I'm supposed to be here. And that I had hope that I could continue. I had a lifetime of problems to solve, and that took time. but the floor of my sadness all of a sudden raised way up.
Oh my gosh. Go ahead. Keep going. I want to hear what you're saying.
Well, I had spent 2-3 months in a deep state of PTSD where I couldn't focus and I was about to lose my job. I was both neurologically dysregulated, where I couldn't focus or remember, but I was also emotionally dysregulated, and I almost got fired on my job. I said something so inappropriate. I could see on everybody's face, they were just like, what? We got to get rid of her. She's, I just seemed dangerous to people. And I was scared. I was losing friends. I was lashing out at people. And I now know that's emotional dysregulation. It's really normal with PTSD and with complex PTSD. And that the prevailing idea that everybody needs to explore their feelings and go into them deeper and grieve, for me, it wasn't the best idea. And I now know there's so many people like me. For us, it's learning to regulate our emotions, that emotions are real and good. But when you have this nervous system injury from abuse and neglect in childhood, sometimes it just has no filter. It has no countervailing force that comes and brings you back to center, where you have a cry and then you're over it. For us, we just cry and cry and cry and cry and cry, or yell and yell. And so that, you can lose everybody in your life that way. But in that early 2-week period, all of a sudden my focus came back and I was able to keep my job, and I would sit in meetings, and unlike anybody else in the room, I could hear everything that was said and pay attention and listen. Most people can't even do that, but that happened very quickly for me. And that was re-regulation. Now I know.
I want to talk about what the practices were that you were doing. And something that came up as you were speaking, Anna, is this, you talked about regulating emotions. And I think this is important because what you said, God, it's so easy to go into, and I heard you say this, like feeling shame, and then you attacked yourself for, like, you already have the PTSD, the trauma, the grief, the emotions. Then on top of that is like, another shitstorm of like attack and saying like, I should feel better, which, whenever you get the should, it's like, oh gosh, blaring lights. But so I'm hearing like, it was so much layered on top of this, and that, to bring up the emotions every time, the image that came to me was, if you had an injury, you would not keep like re-spraining your ankle so that you could like set it again. You would wrap it, you would ice it, you would stay off of it. You probably wouldn't go try to run a marathon on it unless, you want to re-injure it. So there was something about the bringing it up again. It made me think of a physical injury. We just may not have the tools because most of us don't learn this. How do we regulate emotions?
No, or the nervous system. I'm so delighted, like it's bursting out as a topic that many people are talking about right now, and this is great news, because when I was going through the worst of it, like this just wasn't known. There was a cookie cutter idea that was clearly created by people who don't have what I have.
Yeah.
I'm sure it looks from the outside like, if I would just tell you that you should pull your life together, you would do it, right? And of course I would. I'm a good person. I'm intelligent, but I couldn't stop making the same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah.
There was like a neurological like meltdown that would happen inside that you can't even feel. You don't even know why, but it's like, oh, here you are again. You've made the same mistake.
Yeah. Which, like brings despair and hopelessness and that feeling of, which thank goodness you reached out, and the miracle of obviously having that shift, that's where it can feel like when it happens over and over again, is this ever going to end? Is this ever going to stop? Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit. I'd love to talk about, we'll come back to the regulating emotions, but let's talk about what did you do in those 2 weeks, so people can understand. And then of course we'll talk about, the crappy childhood fairy, what you teach and re-regulate, and how that's connected. And I'm so curious, being someone, I'm very open about the 12 steps being so important in my life, been a game changer. And I know some people that listen, whether you're in 12 steps or somebody, or just in a way, in some sort of support system, it can be really powerful. So share with us, what were you doing in addition to meditation? What were you doing that was different than talk therapy that changed everything for you?
I stopped talking about it.
Okay.
First, I stopped talking about it. And it took a little while. There was a day when I went to the therapist and I said, I feel like this is doing me more harm than good. And she was worried that that represented some sort of like break from reality. But what was interesting is she ended up turning up in my 12-step meeting, later when she was sort of, she was hearing that something was happening for me. So I think she came around. She never acknowledged it to me, but yeah, she thought I was crazy when I got better. But I just kept saying, I feel really complete about this. I don't want to talk about my mom. She's dead. I'm really focused on my life right now. There was this emotional relief that came in, and it was what I do is it's a technique I call the daily practice, and it's twin technique, writing with meditation, but it's not just any writing. And I'm going to share with you a link. I have a free course. It takes about an hour to learn it and try it, and it comes with everything you need. And I also teach it in depth and the why and what to do if this happens in the book, Re-Regulated. I had to write the book because I needed to show the whole thing together. Like, this happened, then I use this technique, then it feels like this. Now you get your life together. And I feel like the trauma healing story is a little bit a fable. Like, you hear it a lot. It's like they talk about, oh, she's healed. Nobody's healed. It's not like it is. The wound of trauma is a little bit more like an amputation. You lost something you'll never have again.
Yeah.
And you have to learn workarounds. And then other things you're sort of dented. But a lot of the things that are dented and you need to kind of just shine them up a little bit, that's the inside stuff. But the stuff that happened to you, which is like not your fault, but there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. Those people are probably never going to apologize. And even if they did, would it help? Not really, because the neurological injury has happened already.
Right.
So it's really important to start. It takes a profound spiritual awareness to be able to accept that you got robbed, and then to create a great life anyway, and to stop battling and try. Like my mom died. She died that year, and I regret that I spent the last couple years of her life fighting with her, trying to get her to like say she was sorry and admit what she did, and she just never was going to. And I wish I had just sat around and enjoyed her, because I didn't know yet. Like, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay, even though she's dying without really recovering from her alcoholism or anything, or taking responsibility for the harm caused. And I'm okay anyway. And I think that's, in a way, the gift of losing. I lost most of my family by the time I was 30. I think that's a gift of it. So I learned to take the fearful and resentful thoughts I had. I have fear I'm never going to be okay. I'm resentful at my mom, because I have fear, she didn't take care of me properly, and fear that's damaged me forever, and fear I will never have a proper relationship, and fear I'll always freak out and feel abandoned when people don't want to talk to me. And I had these fears. And then I was not somebody who believed in God when I was shown how to do this, but and she said, that's okay, because what if you got to lose the friend who showed it to me? Fine. Why don't you just put the word God anyway at the top of the page? And I did that. And within the first couple of weeks, I couldn't even believe that such a change could happen so fast just by me putting this effort in. Now, you have to be doing the thing that works for you, but I have no doubt that something spiritual, metaphysical happened to me as a result of doing something that worked. And for me, I could go very deep on this. I think this thing about like blaming and attacking and telling the story of my mother is how I abandon myself. It's how I abandon all my potential as well as my responsibilities. It's her story, and it definitely hurt me, and it's not my fault. But the part where I start to have agency is like, now what? And that's where I was making really self-destructive choices still. I had learned to get neurologically regulated again, and to this day, I know how to get regulated again, and that's what I can claim. I still get dysregulated sometimes. I still like fly off the handle about something, but very quickly I know what's going on, and I can use my techniques and come back. And so that's why I always want to emphasize to people, I'm not living on some island where everybody's perfect or something. I just have the same thing, but I know what to do. And so life goes better, fewer mistakes and fewer, I haven't gotten into these terrible relationships. So the relationships are not terrible. They're pretty good people. And that helps. That helps a lot.
I think there's so much in what you're saying, and I definitely want to go through the daily practice and talk about it with you. And, I think this idea of holding on to fear and resentments, I for those who've done any 12-step work in the fourth step, we look at resentments, and it's interesting. I'm so curious, and to share this for those who are not clear or haven't done that. The idea is that those can kill us. They're on many, emotionally, physically, mentally. And so what I'm hearing you say is there's acceptance. You had to really get that you cannot change. It actually reminds me of the serenity prayer. You can't change the past at all. There's nothing you can do. And you can create with full agency and regulate yourself. And listening to your story, and it's like, if you can do this, and I think this is what's so powerful. I mean, to grow up in that way, then to have this situation with being attacked and having a concussion and, broken up with, I mean, this, feeling like you didn't want to live anymore. It's just, to me, I will say the idea of a higher power, of God, of the creator, it feels like it's moving through you and your message and your work here, because now you're helping so many people, which is what I want to talk about how to. I just give you a lot of credit, because that's where I can just sense and feel you allowing yourself to be used to be of service.
Yeah, I feel like this calling has been with me since I was a kid, and it took me a long time to sort of grow into it, of what it is. But I feel like I'm finally myself.
Can we talk about, because I can just hear people are like, okay, so how do you regulate emotions? And then we can talk about the daily practice. I'm sure it's connected, but let's talk about regulating emotions, like what that means. How do you do that? Where do you begin?
Well, but first, I think there's a trauma-driven belief and also a cultural belief that are sort of working against emotional self-regulation. So one is this idea, you need to feel your feelings. And to this day, when I make videos on YouTube where I say, sometimes you need to feel fewer of your feelings, or sometimes you need to talk less about what's bothering you, that's very countercultural. It flies in the face of what we were taught. And so a few people will argue with me, but many more people will come around and go, wow, I had no idea how much I was keeping my nervous system agitated by continuing to think about, talk about, tell the story, identify with what happened. And that's all. It's not bad to talk about it. There's a right time and place. But we were told like this endless talking. And I also think that sometimes it's the way we make friends with other people. It's like, hi, nice to meet you. It's like, want to hear my trauma? And then sometimes even I remember I had a job where it was like this, some people, I disclosed to people how bad it had been growing up, that I had been hungry at one point. They said, wow, we didn't know that you were so awesome. Like that was like a badge of honor. And I had to kind of check out of all that. There's no virtue in having had all this happen. It doesn't make you special, or no one can criticize you. So it was a lot of allowing myself to be a regular person with other regular people who's just working with an injury. And I had to really swim upstream about that. And one of the areas where I had to make some radical decisions is around romantic relationships. And what I figured out at some point was other people are able, there'd be like this rule of thumb, don't sleep with somebody until the third date or something. Third date is nothing to me. Like that doesn't save me from any of the premature attachment that happens to me because of my attachment wounds, of having been neglected. I would just attach my whole soul to somebody, barely knowing them. I wouldn't even know that I had done that, but boy, I would sure know when they would say, yeah, I think I'm not into this. Or I'd wake up the next morning and be like, what have I done? I don't even like this person, but I can't leave because I have such a bad abandonment wound that it's going to come and gobble me up. I'm going to go into such a bad depression, even though I don't like this person, even though this relationship just started, even though I'm ashamed that this is happening again, I can't leave. It's like flypaper. And that's what was going on with me. That was very hard for me to get help from anybody. And that's a part of my healing that really was something God had to do. People who don't have that attachment wound, people who do, they understand exactly what I'm talking about and they know. And so I teach people, you have to slow down. Other people can live by their set of rules. If you have attachment wounds, you go very slowly with sex. You don't start right away. You get to know somebody, and that you don't let that happen until you have a great deal of certainty that they're sincere. They want to be with you. It's mutual. It is, they match what you want in a partner. or perhaps more, more commitment even. And so with some people, I've just been through years of being a public figure where there's always people just like, you hate women, you're anti-sex, you blah, 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 and, taking responsibility for your own boundaries it's like a radical statement sometimes. And it takes a lot of courage sometimes to do it. And I've also learned how you can set your boundaries without anybody knowing you're doing it. You don't have to make fly a big flag and go, these are my boundaries. Back off. Although it's always like that when you're first learning how to set boundaries. It's like being a toddler, no. Then you get to be a 13-year-old and you're like, I never get what I want. But we're having an accelerated development. There's a developmental delay in effect in our emotional development because of the trauma, because we were not free to melt down or get some help when we needed it, to like, how do I deal with how I'm feeling right now? And this actually like changes how your nervous system develops. Finding that out was like such a relief. It's like, okay, I'm not a bad person. I'm not crazy. I have normal trauma symptoms because of some very abnormal, weird stuff that happened when I was a kid. That lack of support and mirroring and anybody caring. I won't say they never cared, but it was very, alcoholism, very inconsistent. Every once in a while, alcoholics show up and they're like, my darling, I'm here for you now. And it's really great for a couple days. But that's, there's an accelerated development, and it is hard to find anybody outside yourself to help you with that. And I had to kind of depart. So I went to the 12-step program for families of alcoholics. I learned a lot there. And then there I felt like, but with me, there's something else. There was something else that I now know is complex PTSD, that there was kind of a harsh edge to my disease, that there was something more than what I was hearing reflected from other people. And so I knew I had to take what I was teaching out of that milieu and with all respect to the traditions, so that I could teach directly and I could be the teacher and show people how to do this. And I'd originally learned it as the daily steps, and I took it out and I allowed it to be about trauma, which is technically an outside issue in most fellowships. So I taught about that, and I was reading the science coming out about it. And I knew it was also going to be important if people could learn this. And I wanted to share it with everybody. When you first get better, you're just like, I want to tell everybody. First thing, go back to my family. You guys, it's alcoholism. That's what it is. And they weren't very receptive, surprisingly. And they thought I was being very woo-woo and culty, or I don't know what they thought, but they're dead now. So gallows humor. So I needed to be with the people who wanted to hear my message. And so when I took it out of the 12 steps and I made a blog first, and then I put it on YouTube. I'd always meant to write a book, but it takes a long time, and it was going to be a little bit of a road to learn, how do I teach this to people I've never met? And it all sort of came together this year with my book coming out now, Re-Regulated. It's called Re-Regulated: Set Your Life Free from Childhood PTSD and the Trauma-Driven Behaviors That Keep You Stuck. And that second part is the key that I don't think a lot of things go to. It's the trauma-driven behaviors that keep you stuck. Yes, Mom, yes, but it's the choices I keep making. It's the boundaries I'm having trouble setting. It's the black and white thinking, that makes me turn against people because they have their lives together or because I disagree with them. That all of that I can start to transcend and function as a person.
I just so appreciate, first of all, thank you for sharing more about your background. I have a couple different questions. I think one of the questions, and this is something I've noticed myself, and it's a little bit of a curiosity in terms of the when to know to feel something and go into it and not. I hope you don't mind. I'm sure you get these questions all the time. So, for example, I share openly all the time here. One of the behaviors, I would call it survival traits for me, and maybe you've experienced this, is people pleasing. Okay. Which can really wreak havoc. And I did not realize it's, to me, it's a survival trait, right? I want to be liked. I want to make sure it's like to be safe, to be okay. There's, manipulation in it that I didn't even realize was baked in it because that's how to make sure I feel safe, right? Making sure people like me, people pleasing. And so, and sometimes, I know for me, I like people, I generally get along and I like people, but I can tell when I'm using that. So for example, for somebody who might have that, and I'm thinking of others that are listening, I know we have a lot of identified people pleasers here, so hopefully I'm talking for many. I know for me, as someone who didn't express my feelings, what I would do is go to the bags and boxes and the refrigerator. So sugar and food was my choice, not alcohol, or, for someone, it might be shopping or scrolling or sex or whatever.
You had
Or
me at sugar.
what did you say, sugar?
You had me at sugar.
Yeah. Sugar is like, I always said we should really get pulled over when my hand is in a bag of something with more than 20 grams of sugar. Just consider it a DUI because I am now in a crazy zone. I learned that years ago. So I know for me, one of the things, and I'm just curious, I'm asking this for others too, is learning how to feel sadness, frustration, upset, whatever those feelings were, because I was shoving them and denying them and then not present. What do you say to that versus like the feelings that how do you know when to go into them and feel them and when not to? Does that make sense, Anna?
Well, I understand that a lot of people experience that.
Yeah. Hey, beautiful soul. I'm Julie. I'm so grateful that you're here. And I just want to say, if you've been feeling that nudge, like something deep inside of you is whispering, it is time. And yes, this is your sign. I created Intuition School just for you. It is a self-paced, transformative course and deeply spiritual journey designed to help you trust your inner wisdom, connect with your higher self, and unlock the magic that is already and always within you. Imagine no longer second guessing yourself. Imagine following your soul's purpose and having total clarity. Imagine attracting what your heart really, truly desires and effortlessly. I know firsthand that when you trust your intuition, everything changes. That's why I'm inviting you to join me inside this powerful mystery school for the soul. You'll learn the intuition framework, tools, practices, meditations, and healing offerings to help you access your higher guidance. And because I'm so excited for you to begin this journey, I've got a very special gift for you. Just use the code podcast97 to get $97 off of your enrollment. If this is feeling like a soul yes, let's do this together. Step into your divine intuitive power now. You can enroll today at juliereisler.com/intuition school. Use the code podcast97 for $97 off. I will make sure that the links are below. And let me remind you, what you're seeking is always seeking you. Your higher self is waiting. So much love.
But I have never not had access to my sadness. Yeah. I'm just like a sad person who goes around sad all the time, except if I'm in a good, if I'm in a good spiritual state. Like my whole family died. I lost everybody I loved. I'm sad. And so the grief I just was drowning in grief. I've had 2 partners die of overdoses while they were my partner.
Oh gosh.
So grief is not like something I have to go look for.
Yeah.
And so that's where I used to think I was a freak. I'm not a freak. I'm like many people, not all people, but many people.
Yeah.
I just think, gosh, I know what it is to shut down feelings, and I know what it is to feel dissociated.
Yeah.
And dissociation is something that would visit me after intense outbursts of emotional dysregulation, like overly strong, just like, I need to run away. I need to yell. So for me, in terms of like, what this daily practice does for me is helps me stay honest about what I feel. It doesn't matter if it's the right amount or the wrong amount.
Yeah.
I just have fear. I fear nobody likes me. I have fear I have to get out of here. Fear if I go walk out of the bathroom right now, I'm going to shoot my mouth off, and fear I'll lose all my friends. These are feelings that I have, and I have somewhere to take them.
Yes.
Rather than what I used to do was like go to friends and say, I just have this vibe that you don't like me anymore. And they'd be like, I like you. But after a while, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy to be always trying to get from people your emotional reassurance.
Yeah.
Or get them to change how you feel for you. And boy, romantic relationships, that's just like, it's just like, give me a big straw to like suck validation out of you, you know? Like, I feel insecure. And it was a revelation to me that a lot of what I'm feeling, I can handle myself between me and my piece of paper and my higher power. I can write what I feel. And what I do is part of it is asking for it to be removed. And a lot of people, I have to get very nuanced with this because they're like, but I need my feelings. And I'm like, of course you do. Of course you do. And while I teach this to people who have a higher power versus other people who are like, no, I have a higher self, I'm going to do it that way. And for me, I see that as a harder way to do it. But if that's you have to do what's true. You have to do what's real and authentic for you. Nothing else will do. But we just trust the process. We trust that we can write it on paper and like get that distance from those feelings, and they will sort of get rinsed off and come back in a tidier fashion where a lot of stuff just evaporates and it's okay. There's nothing you need to do about that. It's just residue. And other things come into focus and you're like, yikes, I have to act on this. You know, this is actually getting out of hand, which is another thing that just gets lost when you're dysregulated. I want to say something about what it is to be dysregulated. You know, most people, they think of emotional dysregulation. That's one piece of the pie. But when your nervous system is dysregulated, which is like everybody gets dysregulated sometimes, everybody. People who had a trauma might get dysregulated more easily, more often, stay dysregulated for longer. And virtually everyone, they know how to come back, whether they consciously know it or not. We all come back from that state. But if you can learn how to do it efficiently, you know, like, oh, I'm dysregulated, I know the signs, then you can pause. Don't drive a car. Don't try to make major decisions. Don't try to tell people how you feel right now. Go take it to the paper. And you can use some emergency measures that are sort of physical, too, when you're feeling it. So when you're dysregulated, the signs would be you feel discombobulated. You feel clumsy. Dropping things are slipping through your fingers. I often would feel like my hair's in my face. I just feel flustered. You forget where you're going. You forget why you walked in the room. You lose your train of thought mid-sentence. And we make jokes about it. Oh, having a senior moment. But that can be dysregulation. There's a cognitive, little disjuncture that's happening there. And we know that early trauma can actually inhibit your ability to process thoughts and feelings. So processing means taking it from an active experience that's giving you cortisol and adrenaline to making it a memory. And you go, oh yeah, that was a really hard thing that happened. But you don't go into like a whole adrenal reaction to the memory. That's what processing is. So we have trouble with that. And so there's a lot bouncing around in here that just won't go in its little bucket, in its cubby hole of things that have happened and reference points that we can use to have wisdom. Instead, it's bouncing around and it becomes very hard to take in new information. So we have ADHD-like symptoms. And I know a lot of experts believe that some ADHD, at least, is probably complex PTSD. And so learning to re-regulate begins to start bringing your mind into focus, which is what happened for me. And then it can start bringing your emotions into focus, because a lot of that is just bounce. It's just stuff bouncing around with nowhere to go. And it's still activating your emotional centers, which are up here in the right front cortex. It's deactivating your reasoning centers. And so we become unreasonable. And that's what's really hard. And if you have that with the sort of attachment wound variety, some people will flee relationships. Some people will people please. Some people will try to control, and go be like, I'm going to set a bunch of boundaries. You have to say this. You can never say this. You always must do this. Call it boundaries. That's not a boundary. That's control. And we're just grasping at straws in the manner that we've sort of learned will give us a little bit of relief from the overwhelm that is a dysregulated nervous system. It's overwhelming. And so we're just trying to handle what's happening. The price we pay for getting overwhelmed without any kind of relief from that is we have to pull away from people. A lot of people isolate, either overtly or covertly, not ever really committing to anything. And we don't reach out for work that is meaningful and appropriate considering our abilities or the income that we need. And so we become extremely small. Life becomes small so that we can manage all those triggers. And when I say trigger, I mean something that sets off dysregulation, getting criticized, getting shocked, something.
Very, very helpful. I'm so grateful you went over. I was just going to ask you the signs, and I think really helpful to hear. It's so interesting. I'm like, oh, this is just putting some things together. Even what I noticed with my father had extreme PTSD and being in Vietnam and veteran and a lot of things like that and child abuse. Anyhow, so I'm like, this is so. I watched this, growing up. I would have aspects of this, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't, clumsy. It's just fascinating. And I think, to really look at and get that there's nothing wrong with you. This is the response to when you've had a trauma, when you're dysregulated. And knowing that, it takes out, I think, the shame, Anna, and the like I should and I'm not, and which of course just adds to feeling of overwhelm and not good enough and all of that. Can you tell us a little bit about the daily practice, what that looks like, and for someone who wants to start today, pen to paper, what is the system or the process?
Yeah.
What is the daily practice?
Well, I'm going to leave you with a link to the free course because it takes me about 45 minutes to explain it. I'll give you an overview that'll make you want to do that. And my book Re-Regulated has it very detailed and to show you exactly what to do. It's very, very specific. If it's not done in this specific way, it can easily turn into just like a great big list of resentments, which doesn't work. And people can tell immediately. It's a very different spirit that we're doing it in. We're basically, if you can think of a big platter in front of you that you're going to offer this up. It's like, this is what I got. I don't know if it's good or bad. I don't know if it's trivial or important. I give it to you. I'm just giving it to you here. So it's a listing of, we take all negative emotions. We don't worry about like gratitude or things like, you can do all of these practices outside of it, but right now we're offering up to have removed. So, and what we want removed is the stressful thinking. So what are those stressful thoughts? Well, again, you don't worry that, oh, I need to think about, like, I need to get a mammogram, worrying that I haven't had a mammogram. If I forget that, some bad things could happen. Yes. So, but trust the process. You put it up, you just offer it up, you write it down. Now we know that talking about trauma can be very literally re-triggering of dysregulation. Writing those feelings has been shown in the work of James Pennebaker, for example, who I now am friends with, and he endorsed the book. He's done a lot of work on how writing about trauma and negative emotions can not only relieve the emotions effectively, it changes your blood composition. There's a very powerful physiological effect. So we're getting those on paper. We're using a specific request at the end to have those removed. And, the prayer that I do at the end, personally, is taken from my 12-step history. I pray only for knowledge of your will for us and the power to carry it out. The reason I want to be free of all this stuff is so that I can have knowledge and power and become my real self and be effective in the world and be able to take my gifts to you. I'm not happy when I can't do that. I'm not happy when I'm just like trying to survive. So that's the great joy of it. There's this huge process of discovery every time you do it. And we do it twice a day. And when we lead here at Crappy Childhood Fairy, we lead free calls for anybody who wants to come. You can learn how to do it for free and come to free calls on Zoom with us. Hundreds of people come. And we write for 15 minutes, then we meditate for 20 minutes. And people don't have to know a particular form of meditation, but I'm a stickler. You do have to know the writing technique, and we give a free handout during the calls to make sure that people have it and can follow along if they haven't learned it before they join the call. We want everybody who showed up to be included. And then we close our eyes in meditation for 20 minutes because now I learned this from the woman who showed it to me, and then I learned it from my own experience, and now I learned it from James Pennebaker that there's a complete neurological reason for this, but it's very intense to go ahead and name your negative feelings. There's a lot stirring up inside your mind, your soul, everything. It doesn't always feel like it. Like, not everything about your trauma and not everything about your healing is palpable all the time. And so we take care of ourselves and we give ourselves that comfort and healing spell of 20 minutes to just rest after we write. And it's a crucial piece of it to rest afterwards. And some people use Vipassana, some people use mindfulness. I use transcendental meditation. But the key is that it needs to be restful, not the kind of, there are many ways to meditate that are more goal oriented, or like, I will, make me an instrument of thy peace, or, make me awesome, or, solve this money problem. You could meditate. There's many purposes towards which we would meditate. And the purpose on this one is just to go, oh. And so the mantra I suggest to people is like, okay. And sometimes they say, why okay? I go, here, I have a better one for you. Just like, just rest. Don't try to be anything. Don't try to make it go anywhere. Don't try to have a certain result. Discover what the result will be. Sometimes it will surprise you. And I have to keep paper by my side as I'm meditating to this day, because a lot of times in that meditation, once the storm is calmed down, all the creative ideas are coming through. The download is here, and I'm like, oh shoot, I'm meditating. I still got 10 minutes to go. So I jot down what just came to me, because then I can relax my mind again, because I trust I won't forget. We're forgiving with ourselves like that. If we fall asleep in meditation, it's okay. That must be what you needed. We need that rest. And so I would look at it now. My understanding of it is, you're doing the work of naming this stuff that's bouncing around, and you've given it an outlet, and it is processed now. Now, those thoughts are going to come back, and you might have to do it again and again, and that's okay. It's okay if it's repetitive. Some are, some aren't. Body image comes every day. Actually, now that I'm older, I'm getting over it. Fear I have too much to do every day. And, when I'm dead, I won't have that. So it just comes, and then the rest, and then just resting my mind. And afterwards, we discover what seems important. And that's also, like, people are so surprised. Everybody who has trauma has been working so hard to try to keep it together, to try to be better, to try to change, to try to be able to have good relationships and enough money to live on, and, just the basic things that we would like to have. We've worked so hard. It's hard to believe that just resting is now the secret. Once you've named it, you allow it to happen. And that's when it really helps to have a community too, to start. You hear other people's experience, and you can get a little bit like, wow, look at that. I know Sharon. Sharon just took a rest, and all of a sudden she got her answer. And now she feels kind of like excited to go do the next thing in her day. Maybe I could do that.
Amazing. Wow. I'm thinking about, it's just really fascinating. I teach and talk a lot about intuition, which really is syncing up with the divine, with higher power, with God. And I love what you're saying. We'll definitely have the link for everyone, so they can take the free course and learn the steps to it. What it sounds so powerful to me is it's giving a safe, sacred space to offer up whatever is going on without judgment. And I love this idea of the resting after and the discovery. It's not making something happen. I think for many of us, especially if we've had trauma, there's a overachieving, like I've got to figure it out and make shit happen. And it's, I'm learning as I go, but I resonate so deeply. It's actually interesting, this whole idea of being your Youest you. It came through in a meditation, actually, and the idea of it, and I am like, neurons are connecting as you're speaking, and I'm like, oh my gosh, part of it, discovering that it's a discovery, is the connection to, you could call it your higher power, higher self, the universe, and it's not through our overly thinking left brain mind. And so this to me, it's just what a beautiful way to also have intimacy with ourselves, and to learn that you don't have to make it happen. In fact, that's not where it happens. That's not where the healing happens. I love the overview you gave. I can completely see how this, and twice a day, it's a commitment. It's a commitment to yourself, and we're worthy of that.
We are. It's funny. Sometimes I get people that they go, how do I get the discipline to do it? I'm like, don't worry about it. If you're in pain, you'll do it. Once you have a good experience with something that makes you feel better, you'll want to do it.
Yeah.
You'll want to do it. What it has been for me in becoming my meest me.
Yeah. Yay.
This book has been in me ever since I had that radical awakening 2 weeks after I started. I was like, somehow I need a way to get this to the world.
Mm.
And then I was a single mom. I was struggling. I was a single mom. I was busy. I had to make a living. And then things came together in the right time and place. And I had, learned how do you do this? And I started it as a blog. Then I started the YouTube channel, which turned out to be such a great medium for me personally, for my spirit, for how I communicate. There's stuff that if I said in a 12-step meeting, people would just be like, whoa, it'd be like a blowtorch in their face. But you could say it on YouTube, and there's this little comfortable distance where people can decide whether to take in what you're saying or not. They don't have to do anything, and knowing that has just been really wonderful. And then they leave comments. And so much of what I've learned is from doing 800 something videos on YouTube and reading every comment that comes in about what do people think about that? What's been their experience with it? And so finally now, and then you have the following. To actually publish a book, publishers want to see you have a following, right? And so that following was there, and it came together last year when I got my agent and then my publisher, Hay House. And I'm having this incredibly fulfilling experience of having now written the book end to end. It's not like a hydra of a bunch of little videos or blog posts. This is a process, step by step. Here's how you can follow the process of first understanding what the problem is, now learning to re-regulate, and then a step-by-step process to reconnect with people, change your self-defeating behavior, and become more yourself. And the book is full of questions and quizzes and things that you can do to stay active with the lessons as you work through it. And it comes out, as we're recording this, it's in 11 days. And so I feel like a baby who's about to be born. I'm so excited about this. It's such a fulfillment of something I've been trying to share. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to share it with your audience.
Oh, our pleasure. The book is out. When people are listening, the book is out, and I just really honor you. And and honestly, on a spiritual level, it's like, looking at the back of the tapestry is all knotted and weird, and you're like, what is that? And you turn it over, and it's like, oh my God, that's gorgeous. And it feels like the divine, you saying yes, working through you. And this, to me, is, even as you're saying it came together, that to me is the thumbprint of the divine, right? That's when we get out of the way so you can be of service, so you can make an impact. And it's powerful. And the subject matter is so important. And I'm really grateful to talk about this. I think that I would imagine almost everyone, if you're listening, you're still here with us. Yay, we're grateful. And of course, to get your book re-regulated, and to learn the daily practice. I'm curious, 2 questions before we wrap. One would be, out of all the comments and experiences other than your own, is there one that sticks out to you that just blew you away in terms of the healing and what they went through and what and how they came out the other side using this process? That's going to be hard. I know, probably.
I'm going to cry, really. I have such a, I just went on a camping trip, and every day somebody would recognize me and come up and tell me, you changed my life so much. One woman was with her dad right then and there. And I don't know what their story was, but I could feel the energy of it. And she was very shielded in his presence. And he had said, oh, I'll take a picture of you guys. Here, she gives her consent. I was like, do you want a picture? Is it okay with you if I share this photo? And I shared the photo on my Instagram the other day. And her face, I looked at the photo later, and it was just her beautiful, tender face was so powerful for me. But I get very, I have a video. I just did one today came out today called You Want Closure. And I take letters. I'm like Dear Abby on YouTube a couple times a week. I teach one day a week. I do a mashup one day a week. And I take letters. And it was a letter from a man who had such a harsh life, but I could hardly read the letter. I was just in tears. And I let it stay. I was sort of embarrassed. And then I was like, just let it stay. This story is so sad. And so many people have been responding to it all day. Just they recognize themselves. And so for me, when I first started, there were always a few therapists who were like, who the hell do you think you are? You're not a therapist. What right do you have to say all of this? And I was like, what right do you have to stop us from helping each other when we can, when we have help to give? And I guess some people have never heard of like 12-step programs, or it's okay to help other people. But we help them so much by recovering and being vulnerable and transparent. Like, look, I'm an F up, I've had terrible problems and I know what to do about them. If you want what I have, just know I'm not on that island of perfect people. I just have problems and I know what to do about them. I have a lot of practical tools. And so now I get the pleasure of watching people, like in my membership program, they talk to each other on Facebook and they are teaching each other these things and helping each other. I'm like, wow, my experience has been transferred into all these other minds and hearts who are taking it through their life experience and helping others. And it's this massive movement. It's just this massive number of people who are waking up to these, all of us, we're people who maybe weren't helped very much by standard treatments. And we thought that we were doomed to be stuck like we are, and we're not at all doomed. We've changed so radically, and we get to experience like the full range of colors and textures of life now, including the sadness, including sometimes getting dysregulated and being unreasonable, but coming back and being able to love and be loved and to bring our gifts to bear in the world.
Beautiful. Beautiful, Anna. The last question, a little more on the spiritual side of things. I'm just curious with the work that you've done, and have you sensed your mom around, or any connection with her, or any of your loved ones, your family that have passed on? I inquiring minds, including myself, just curious what's come out of there for you spiritually.
I don't think I've ever been asked that before, and it has been on my mind lately. And I do have a feeling of nearness of some people, like my dad. My mom, in her life, did not want kids. And she was in resistance to me all along. And I've always wondered if sometimes I would feel that there was some kind of amends between us. And there is an amends in that I have moved on without expecting anything. But at times when I've had dreams about her, I dream about her as somebody standing in the distance and she sees me and she just keeps walking away. And so I don't know. I do feel that these relationships are dynamic, that they can continue to evolve, but I don't know what's going to happen with that one. I don't feel like she's there. and yet I am, I'll tell you something. I get these visions sometimes, and had this beautiful vision where I realized I was looking at my hands, I was feeling my hands, and like my hands are alive. There they are. My hands are in there. My life is in there. And that life was a spark that was passed to me by both my parents. And it's been passed through all the generations, all the way back to the beginning of life, that the spark of life has come through these living things, living beings, living humans. And that was given to me, and that I feel my life, and that connection is profound, even though it's not like the connection of, the caring mother all the time. Although, do you have kids, Julie?
I do. Yes, I have two teens. Yes.
So I bet you know the feeling where you raise your kids and you're just like, how could my parents have neglected me through this stuff? Like, I would never let that happen to them. And I think that's a way I feel connected to my mom. I tell the same jokes. I have the same, like she used to say, hish, hish. It's like a Norwegian way of saying quiet, quiet, you kids. Hish. And you go, I want cookies. She goes, I'll cookie your behind. She was from Brooklyn. She was just kidding. She wasn't violent or anything. But I would talk that way to my kids, and I feel that connection. I can feel like the generations through me. And I don't know what happened to her, because her parents, they were pretty cool. They were immigrant kids who did okay and had a lot of friends. And as far as I can tell, they were okay parents. And that's where, I don't know why, it seemed like all her siblings ended up alcoholic and addicts and suffered. And so I don't know what happened there. It's a mystery. I have to accept that a lot of this is a mystery. And there's also a mystery, like, why among all my family members, I have one sibling who is like, has always been really together. So that's also a mystery. How did that happen? One died, one is at large. But why did I get to have this gift of healing? Why? And I just don't have an answer, I don't know, but I'll take it.
Mm.
Grateful for it.
Yeah, beautiful. Wow. Well, maybe we'll do this again, and if there's something that shifts or opens up, I'm always fascinated by the relationships as people transition out of the physical body and as we, in a way, in regulating your nervous system, shifting your consciousness, your energy, your vibration, and having that deeper capacity to really connect in all different levels. It just sounds like so much healing has happened for you. And then, of course, the millions that are involved with this movement. Obviously, it's touching a nerve that needs to be healed.
Yeah, it does. It's a very loving movement, and it's a rigorous path for people who want to follow it. It's counterintuitive sometimes to take the focus back to the one thing you can change, yourself in present time.
Yeah. Well, often the counterintuitive is exactly what is needed. I've learned oftentimes things are upside down. So those things that we think, seem counterintuitive are actually, there's a gem of healing and truth there. Yeah.
I'd love to talk again sometimes. I have a lot of interest in things like how do people become susceptible to cults? Because traumatized people are the ones who are susceptible.
Interesting.
Yeah. And how does a lot of people lying about reality, which is a lot of how we grew up, but can happen also in adulthood where everybody's like covering something up or pretending something's true that isn't true. How does that jam the radar of your intuition and your ability to perceive reality? That's where a lot of the trouble gets in. That's how you get large scale child abuse and things. Is everybody just agrees to not see it?
Yeah, that would, I think, could be around too. And it can be such a spectrum too. I'm thinking loving parents for me and my father with undiagnosed PTSD. I mean, it was just really, he suffered a lot of trauma. He's still alive, but especially just in his health and his finances. I mean, and we just, something around not seeing it, not talking about it, anyhow, just I've learned so much about that whole covering up, and that doesn't work. Side note, doesn't work long-term to do that. But I know there's a spectrum where it's major traumas and things that everyone agrees to there's an agreement not to say anything or see anything. Yeah, a lot more. Well, in divine timing, it would be fun to talk more. I have a feeling that this interview, I'm just going to say to all of our beautiful listeners, the family here, all over the globe, to leave comments. I also review and respond to everything. And any questions for you, Anna, feel free to leave them and make sure you have the link too, so we can respond. But to let us know how this is affecting you and to check into the daily practice. That will be for sure, both in the show notes and on YouTube in the description. And I love what you're doing. I think the reminder that it's okay to help others and in a loving way, we can all, as we recover together, as we heal, that's one of the biggest gifts coming from a healing place. And it's just beautiful what you're doing. Thank you for the work that you've committed to. It's really, it's powerful.
Thank you.
And I just want to say a special thank you to you for being here and watching and hanging with us. And I hope that this conversation sparks something in you that helps you to really look at how might you take better and more loving care of the most important person, which is yourself, and to check out Anna's daily practice, her book, Re-Regulated, and we will be happy to answer. I'm always happy to answer comments and questions. And as always, this is truly about you loving and being your Youest you. Sending love to each of you and to you, Anna. Thank you.
Bye, Julie.